All right, everyone. Now it's time to talk about the enormous fundraising disadvantage that the GOP faces going into the 2024 election. And it is no joke. The Democrats are flush with money, and the Republicans, and certain competitive states, they're basically broke right now. Some places they're doing good fundraising. I will point out that there are 3 reasons for this. And a lot of the takes that I see only focus on one of them. But there's really 3 reasons. The first is that there's a lot of infighting in the Republican Party. For instance, in Michigan, there's a complete schism between the neocon sort of establishment GOP there and the populist sort of MAGA side. They're not working with one another to fundraise. They're sort of going it alone. Naturally, therefore, the party structure within that state is going to be impoverished because they can't organize anything. Half the party is going one way, half the party is going the other. They're not willing to cross-fundraise or organize with one another. They don't even want to talk to each other. What the fuck do you think the result of that is? They've got a similar problem in other states as well. So the first is party infighting. And you do see infighting within the Democratic Party, but where you see that, for instance, with the Geek Squad, are in areas that are safely blue. And so it doesn't really matter if the neoliberals don't campaign for Ilhan Omar, because she's basically guaranteed re-election unless someone of Middle Eastern heritage happens to run against her on a conservative platform, which would be fucking hilarious. I would point out there is a looming problem for the Democrats, which is that they've pissed off a lot of Islamic voters in the country. Well, that's not necessarily the greatest idea. You see, Michigan and places up there are more competitive than Long Island. They appear to have bet on a losing horse for that one. Be interesting to see if they get punished as well by the Jewish community and end up losing complete control of New York. Polling suggests that it's getting a little bit closer, and it ain't just because Lee Zeldin happens to be charismatic. So that's number 1, infighting. Between 2 polar ideologies within the party, one which is pro-war, one which is anti-war. One wants corporatism, the other wants economic populism. One party wants adventurism and interfering with the economy, and the other one tends to be more free market, etc., etc. So that's one. One side likes Trump, the other side likes Nikki Haley. They don't get along with one another very well. The second is that the RNC and the fundraising apparatus at the national level is corrupt. We've seen this with Ronna McDaniels, etc. Now sticks, some of you will tell me. Donald Trump endorsed Ronna McDaniels. Yeah, that's because he knew that she would win and wanted to endorse the winning person, so there would be at least a limited amount of cooperation. It was a strategic move, not an ideological one. I'll just gloss past that in passing. The RNC, etc., like with the McCarthys of the party, he's not seeking re-election. Again, he sees the writing on the walls getting out when the getting's good. Ronna McDaniels, the Mitch McConnells of the party, you saw what Mitch McConnell did, for instance, in 2022. Lisa Murkowski is running against a Shibaka, another Republican in Alaska, for the Senate position. The position could not go to a Democrat. It was going to be a GOP held position. What did Mitch McConnell decide to do? He took $10 million and funneled it into Murkowski's re-election bid. $10 million that would have flipped the Georgia Senate seat to Herschel Walker. It could have propped up Blake Masters. It could have been used in a number of other races, but it wasn't. It was frittered away on a GOP v. GOP race, roughly mimicking the party infighting at the national level that exists in some states at the state level, by the way. So it's an extension of that. Ronna McDaniels is not willing to lend proper logistic support to candidates. Scott Pressler, for example, probably the greatest get-out-the-voter that the Republicans currently have, has been repeatedly ignored by Ronna McDaniels insofar as advice and consulting goes. You should put him in as head of the RNC. Guarantee there'd be a fundraising turnaround then. You wouldn't be suffering a 3-to-1 disadvantage. Although you would still be at a disadvantage, and that's point number 3. The third reason is that the Democrats have become the party of the super rich. The corporations, the banks, legacy media, etc. are largely on board with the Democratic Party. And even those that aren't on board with MAGA conservatism, MAGA populism. They're on board with the neocons, maybe. They would support Mitt Romney's re-election bid, which he's not going to do. They would support Mitch McConnell. They'd support maybe a Lindsey Graham. They might even support some of the missing link Republicans like Ted Cruz. But they're not going to support Lauren Boebert. They're not going to support Miss Luna. They're not going to support Trump. They're not going to support Rand Paul or somebody like that. They want neocons. They don't want libertarian or populistic-leaning Republicans. They wish that they were all gone so they could get more corporate handouts. Well, the Democratic Party represents that corporatism. They've taken up that banner. That's why the Bushes keep sitting it out and the McCains and so forth of the parties, oh, I'd rather work with Biden than that evil Trump. Orange man bad. And everyone associated with him. Fuck Matt Gaetz. Fuck Lauren Boebert. Fuck Marjorie Taylor Greene and all these others. Because they're a thorn in the side. They don't always vote party line. That's number one. And number two, they represent populism. More or less. There are some, again, there's some wiggle room. No, they don't always vote the same. They don't always hold the same exact values, which is actually commendable more than anything else, that they don't hold that party line. I'm not a Republican, for example, because I like to win. And I don't support corporatism. I think that we should give power back to the people. Ironically, I sound like a fucking Lenin-era hippie when I say that, but that's a populist line. Give people more of their own money, deregulate their activities, and allow them to live more freely. I don't understand why this is even up in the air or for debate. That's basically the American way. That's what all parties should be fighting for. It's just they have different ideas on how to achieve it, but that should be the fundamental central civic goal, but it appears not to be. Certainly not for the goddamn neoliberals and neocons. But that's the hegemon within politics. So the Democrats don't suffer the same type of infighting. I've pointed out that they do have a lot of infighting, but it tends to be just on the national level. Like with legislation there, AOC and Ilhan Omar and Tlaib and a few of these others, Presley, will hold out on the party on certain votes. Or certain union Dems, like a Manchin or a Sinema, they might hold out as well. So there is that infighting. But it's not at the localized level like it is, or the state level like it is for the Republican Party, which is more damaging to the GOP than the infighting that you see in the Democratic Party, except when the far left pushes something that's totally monstrous and insane, but then the Republicans can't capitalize on it. Why? Because they don't like to win. There was an article the other day on basically that topic. Why is it that the GOP enjoys losing so much? Because they're Republicans. You know, Democrat diseased rat, Republican paralyzed goat. Still the greatest political meme I've ever seen. I laughed so hard when I saw that. Well, Chaz Garden's more meme-worthy, to be clear. But as far as standalones, I'd say that one definitely wins my heart and my mind. And then you have the RNC, the corrupt. They're not holding the line. They're not going to stump around for Trump candidates or anything like that. They're trying to crush the MAGA populist movement so they can keep the corporate money flowing. And get back to decorum. Yeah, decorum like we had under George W. Or his daddy. You know, that's or Mitt Romney, people like that. That's the decorum that we need. That's the Republican Party that, by the way, will really win the youth vote. And really will siphon away votes among non-white voters from the Democrats. What you see is a shift right now where the Republicans are becoming the broad coalition party while suffering in the neocons, as the neocons sound more and more like Democrats every day. And the Democrats have been the party of big money and top-down centrality and authoritarianism. They've given up on the old hardline Carter liberalism, maybe the bleeding heart era, but then they just became more like the party of corrupted second-term Ronald Reagan, only with more youth appeal. That's basically the modern Democratic Party, that and their socialist attaches, their auxiliary forces. The GOP has gobbled up a bunch of people too, but that means less fundraising. You're basically gobbling up a bunch of disenfranchised voters. Well, who's most likely to feel disenfranchised? People who don't have the money to donate to you. So if you don't have a bunch of banks and corporations controlling your party, yeah, naturally you're going to suffer a 3-1. In that sense, it's actually good for the GOP. They've become truly a more populist movement. Now, they could look at this as an advantage and say, well, we can streamline things. We don't need the big budgets that the Democrats need to run candidacies. We see right now Trump is being outraised and outspent massively by Joe Biden, while under lawfare seeking to bankrupt him, and yet he's still well ahead in the polls, for example. He's kicking ass. Will that trickle down, though? Will that appeal trickle down to people in the House, people in the Senate, people running for gubernatorial slots, mayors and shit like that? Remains to be seen. A lot of those campaigns still need a huge amount of money. So the demographic shift is ongoing with regards to the two parties, but it's not a single issue that is plaguing the GOP. It's two issues internally plaguing them, and one issue that they can't help simply as they make the transition to populism. That part is not a bad thing. In fact, it is an advantage. Ideologically and morally and civically, it's an advantage not to be the party of the big tycoons. That was the GOP of yesteryear. The GOP of yesteryear typically outraised and outspent the Democrats. They still managed to win 50-50. So I don't see why on that token they're worried. They just need to get their shit together. They need to clean house at the RNC and get the neocons and the MAGA conservatives to at least tolerate one another long enough to organize at the state level, especially in places like Michigan. That's about all. Peace out.